Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
No, hi. All right, I'm gonna turn the video on. Yeah, there I am. Hi, my name is Walton, and I got an invitation from Empress, and I'm here to see what the meeting's about.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, sister. Where are you calling from? Where are you checking in from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm calling from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay, cool. All right. Good, thanks. Okay, anyone else joined us yet?
Yes, I'm on the line also. I am Brother Lumumba Uncased. I am a member of the MWM March Universal Movements, Brothers in Support, as well as the Men of Valor Action Committee. And so I'll be helping facilitate with admin and any other roles that might be necessary for this Zoom meeting, as far as co-hosting is concerned. And I'm from Philadelphia as well, born and raised.
Okay, great. Okay, we're just going to give folks a few more minutes to come in. In the meantime, brother, can you just kind of give an overview of what the Charge Genocide 21 campaign is?
Okay. So the We Charge Genocide, like we're having another member that's going to be joining us shortly as well.
Okay.
But yes, the We Charge Genocide 21 campaign is an initiative that has been put forth by the MWM March Organization and Universal Movements in the vein of continuing the legacy of the greats of Malcolm X, Queen Mother Moore, Paul Robeson, William Patterson, and others who in 1957 and 59, if I'm not mistaken, had taken the grievances that they had gathered from the community of rapes, of beatings, of murders, so on and so forth, all the atrocities that was being waged against Black people, and they gathered a listing and had people sign off on it and gather signatures that highlighted these incidents. And they had gathered, thousands of signatures, and was in lieu of taking those signatures to the United Nations, as well as the African Union, charged the United States government. A lot of it was based on police brutality and things of that nature.
Actually, 1951, Paul Robeson and William Patterson took the initial petition to the United Nations, and that was specifically focusing on the various lynchings, beatings of our people during that time period. And so they did submit an initial petition that was signed by over 100 different organizations. And then later, in 1902, Queen Mother Moore, and then she also, as Brother Bloomberg mentioned, I think in 1957, also his signature.
Okay. Looks like we might have lost.
I think I'm back now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, like we got you back.
We had a little glitch there. So in 1957, so said that she did submit signatures to the United States.
Oh, yeah, excuse me, my apologies. For some reason, you're sounding kind of choppy with your audio.
Okay, is that better now?
Yes.
Okay, so
Oh, might have lost you again.
yeah. petition.
No, I can't hear you. No, not coming through. Audio is very choppy.
I'm going to another location.
Okay, okay, it's sounding better now.
Okay, it's better now.
Yes.
Okay, so what I was saying is that there has not been an actual petition submitted that focused on the various atrocities. There's been, of course, different efforts that have occurred. 1979, I believe it was, the Black United Front did a We Charge Genocide campaign. But again, most of the campaigns have focused on police and governmental terrorism, along with, of course, the lynchings, the murders, and those types of things, that those have been the primary focuses. The We Charge Genocide 21 is literally the first to focus on 21 areas of crimes against humanity. And so while, of course, reparations is a primary, we've created a formula that we call the R4J. And that encompasses not only reparations, but what we call restitution, also retribution, and restoration, which are all 4 areas of law. They have different applications. And so while many will focus just on reparations, which of course we support and we also advocate for, we are also looking at restitution as it is applicable to the various areas of law. Also retributionary law, which means punishment. And again, when we talk with our attorney, our international advisor and ally, we'll be going more in depth with those areas because again, we want to make sure that we're doing something a little different from what has been done and is being done, but we're connecting with entities that have already set the groundwork in place for us as our ancestors have enabled us to do or have really prescribed for us to do. I think, Brother Lumumba, do we have our attorney, Dr. Musa in queue? Do you see him? I can't really tell.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to get ready to bring him in. But in the meantime, again, one of the things that you'll hear us talk about tonight is to begin the preparations for establishing, if not an institute, some entity that will be able to research, that will provide training for those who are interested in becoming advocates, activists, paralegals, want to provide assistance to already existing lawyers or are interested in law school themselves. We want to have our own unit with the We Charge Genocide 21 in collaboration with other entities so that we can really show this Black United Front that Brother Malcolm taught us about and encouraged us to do, but bring it into the 21st century. And so we cannot talk about, or we won't, shall I say, talk about just reparations and not talk about nation building. Because we don't want folks, at least to some degree, we would prefer that some of our people at least look at the bigger picture, which is, of course, having our own nation. So this is not just about, oh, I want to get a check, yeah, that's good. We down with that. Oh, I want to get that. Yeah, we down with that. What about our own land? What about our own buildings, independent institutions? What about our own government? Things of that nature. So this is the level that we're bringing this We Charge Genocide 21 into fruition. And so this is it's a process. So for those who are looking for some overnight or next month or next year kind of resolution, I'm not saying that some things will not be accomplished, because they certainly will, but in the bigger picture, we're talking about the establishment of an independent, recognized nation by the world. And so it's my pleasure and honor to introduce to everyone Dr. Musa Dan Fodio, who is an acclaimed international law and human rights attorney who has agreed to work with us and vice versa. We are now getting ready to establish some YouTube lessons or training sessions that we'll tell you more about later. But right now, we just want to start giving you some preliminaries. What is international law? How is that applicable to our human rights struggle? And of course, to nation building. And so without further ado, Brother Lumumba, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And again, we're going to bring in Dr. I call him Baba Musa lovingly, but professionally, Dr. Musa Dan Fodio.
Yes, give thanks, give thanks. All right, and Dr. Musa, if we have you in queue, you can go ahead and unmute your mic. If you could just introduce yourself, give a briefing to our listening audience. It's also being recorded so we can share it further on our other social media platforms. So Dr. Musa, if you would, thank you.
Okay, greetings everyone. And I'd like to start out by thanking you for inviting me to the Zoom meeting. And I'm excited that we have such interest in the topics that you all are discussing. I think what I'm going to do tonight, as briefly as I can, is I'll talk a little bit about reparations, and I'll talk about nation building, and I'll talk about economic trade and investment, and reuniting the family. And that's really one of the major focuses that I like to talk about, is reuniting the family, because all of this is part and parcel of reparations. All of this is the same topic. I like to let you know that my orientation is from a Pan-Africanist perspective. I am a human rights lawyer and an international lawyer. I also deal in the area of trade and investment as well. But my introduction into this area came from Dr. Yusef Chi, who was my supervisor and mentor. He passed in like 2012, but he was a protege of Malcolm. He was with Malcolm when Malcolm broke away from the Nation of Islam and began the Organization of Afro-American Unity and the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. Dr. Cly was a professor and an international lawyer, and he taught in Canada, in Regina, University of Regina. But he supervised my PhD in international law. So in addition to a regular Jewish doctorate degree that most attorneys have, I have a PhD in international law. And he was my supervisor. So I'm a prodigy of Malcolm. I'm a grandson, I guess, of Malcolm in that respect. So a lot of things that you're going to hear from me is going to be a continuation of Malcolm's work, brought currently into today's political and legal framework. And some things that were not in place in 1965 are in place now. So where Malcolm was in 1965 was he had discovered that the most appropriate route for African descendants was to seek their human rights and get off of the being stuck on just seeking your civil rights. What he discovered was that your civil rights only encompass 1/3 of your human rights. There were 2/3 of rights that you were not accessing by merely fighting and struggling for your civil rights. 1/3 of it was, most importantly, the right to self-determination, and which is a whole subject in and of itself. And the other third was your economic, cultural rights that were being advanced at that time, but they hadn't been codified and put into any kind of legal framework in 1965. You know, so we moved forward 20 years ago, and I'm gonna, you know, I guess hit on the whole notion of reparations. And 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, that was the Durban Conference in South Africa, the Conference Against Racism, where about 198 nations, minus 5, so about 193 nations, voted that the victims of the transatlantic slave trade were entitled to reparations due to the gross human rights violations that were committed. And of course, the United States, Israel, Britain, Great Britain, France, even Canada and Australia were the only dissenting countries. Most all the other ones favored that proposition and voted accordingly. So the international legal framework is in place for reparations. The issue is who has the legal and juridical status to claim as a claimant those reparations. No 501c3 has, no NGO has, no organization has that legal status. The world is organized now in terms of nationhood and member states of international bodies who are nations. The UN is composed of 198, 199 nations. The African Union is composed of 54 nations. The Organization of American States, the Asian Pacific Rim, all of those regional organizations are composed of member states. If you're not a member state, all you can be is an observer or have consultative status with those international bodies. So even though you have Jamaica and Haiti and Barbados and the Bahamas and the Caribbean, who are nation states, those are small states. You have 54 states in Africa that are member states. But the African descendants in America are not a member state, even though they encompass almost 50 million people. The African descendants that are in Brazil, they are not a member state in the sense of being an African descendant. They may be a part of Brazil that is a member state, just like the African Americans here in the United States are only members through the United States. They don't have their own nation. As a result of that, the victims of the crimes against humanity during the transatlantic slave trade do not have the proper legal structure to ever obtain reparations. Even though it's solidly founded in international law and restorative justice, and we talk about the various remedies and all of that stuff, it doesn't matter if you don't have a legal structure and a juridical status to access it. There's remedies without a person, out an entity that's capable of receiving it. So I use that to segue into the conversation about nationhood. But first, before I do want to outline for you the remedies for reparations. Bovitt, what's his name? It escapes me now. It'll come. But several years ago, over 20 years ago, one of the international legal scholars and and special rapporteurs at the UN laid out, guidelines that have been followed in terms of what reparations entails. It entails 4 items. Number 1, restitution. Number 2, rehabilitation. Number 3, compensation. And number 4, safeguards and protections from future repetitive violations. Those are the areas of reparations from a legal perspective. Those are the remedies. And those are group remedies. Those are collective remedies. Those are not individual remedies. That's for the group of the people who are the victims of the human rights violations, the Africans in the diaspora, primarily. Now, I want to use that to segue into nation building. Because unless we're having a serious conversation about nation building, we're just tossing around academic concepts, and we're just talking academically. We're not really speaking from a practical perspective. I no longer participate in those type of conversations. Just purely academic conversations. The academic part is there for people to learn and to study and have a background with. But I'm more, at my age, I'm into practical applications of the law, not theoretical conversations and discourses, because most of this is not even debatable anymore. It's well-founded law in terms of reparations. So my conversation centers around how do you access it? What do you do to make this real? And so I speak in terms now, mostly in terms of the area of what it takes to build a nation and nationhood. In 2017, and I'm not going to be long, I'm trying to do this as briefly as possible. 2017, a group of grassroots leaders gathered in Tougaloo, Mississippi, at Tougaloo College, a former slave plantation in Mississippi. And the grassroots leaders came from basically the way we naturally and organically organize. It was from a religious basis. We had the Christians, the Hebrews, the Jews, the Muslims, the Moors. We had the black lawyers, black accountants, black MBAs, black other religious organizations like the Nation of Islam, the Lost and Found Nation of Islam, not Farrakhan's group. We had the Washita, the Gullah Geechee. We had people from Belize. We had people from Guyana. We had people of the Republic of New Africa. We had the Malcolm X contingent. We had several grassroots leaders from all sectors of our community. And the conference was the first conference on Confederation and human rights remedies. So it was a 3-day conference. We spent the first couple of days educating on international concepts like self-determination and plebiscites and nation building and concepts like that. And that is used in international law. And then, we had a participation from all of the groups. And then we had, at the end, they all signed a Declaration of Self-Determination, the African Descendant Declaration of Self-Determination, which is analogous and was modeled after the Declaration of Independence that was drafted in the United States when the American colonies broke away from Great Britain. So it was modeled after that. And so it served as that purpose, but we had signatories of that. So that was done. And in the process of doing that and having done that, it inspired some of our brothers in the diaspora, particularly the ones in Europe. And they went forward to start organizing government. So they developed the executive branch of government. And they called it the State of the African Diaspora Nation government. And you can Google that right now as we speak, so you can kind of have an orientation of what's already in place. So they have ministers of the various disciplines selected in cabinet positions and all of that. So an executive branch was formed. In order to have government from an international perspective, in order to have nationhood from an international perspective, we use the Organization of American States model, where number one, there has to be a clearly identifiable people. Number two, clearly identifiable territory. Number three.
Excuse me, Dr. Musa, if I can interrupt for 1 second. If you could repeat that resource one more time, I'm going to attempt to look it up really quickly and put it in the chat.
Which one? Okay,
You access to Google.
Diaspora government.
Say that one more time for me, please.
The State of the African Diaspora Government.
State of the African Diaspora Government. All right, give thanks.
Okay. But in terms of the principles that laid out for establishing nationhood, it was done in the Western Hemisphere by the people of the Organization of American States and those legal scholars there. And they came up with the concept that there needs to be one, a clearly identifiable people. Number two, a clearly identifiable territory or land. And number three, a way to communicate with those people through government, which is the most practical means, is the government, formalized government. So African descendants in the diaspora are clearly identifiable. We know who we are. We can look and tell each other by sight mostly. But now you got DNA and a whole lot of other things to aid you. But so that's the case. We are clearly in clearly identifiable territories and areas. In fact, in the United States, there are over 1,200 cities, local government authorities that are governed by mayors and African diaspora city council people, where they govern those areas. Those areas are clearly have boundaries and geographic territories that are outlined. So we clearly meet the first two items, but what we are building on is having to build government in order to reach that third prong, in order to be recognized as a nation from an international legal perspective. And that third prong, it encompasses, building government. And if an executive branch has been established, we can easily have government by having two other branches, a judicial branch and a legislative branch. That the legislative branch being the branch that represents the population, the popular element of the common person, as a place where they can be represented from a democratic perspective. We're building a African Diaspora Court of Justice Center as we speak, which means that there will be two branches of government developed once that's done. So the branch that's left to be developed is the legislative branch, and which requires a bit more effort because we want to have a representative body, but it can be an interim legislative branch where their sole purpose as an interim legislature is to construct the rules and the format of a permanent legislature and how that can be installed. So at this point, there can be feasibly a interim legislative branch. But once those three branches of government are formed, we have government. And we have what it takes to feel the of government of the diaspora. Now, many of you already know that the African Union has a sixth region already mandated and set aside for Africans in the diaspora. African Union is divided up into 6 regions. Number one, they have the North, they have the South, they have the East, the West, and a Central region, but they set aside the 6th region for the diaspora. So there's already mandated in the charter of the African Union. It's just a matter of the people in the diaspora organizing themselves to take advantage of that mandate. So that means immediately after government is formed, the African diaspora is recognized by 54 nations if it's a member state of the African Union. African Union recognizes them, and there's 54 members that recognize them, that qualifies them to be a full member of the United Nations and among the 198 nations of the world. So it's not an undaunting task. It just has to be a focused task. Now, in the meantime, what we've been doing is we have been, our energies have not been focused on establishing nationhood, and it's been dispersed into so many directions because there's so many different issues that we have to deal with, whether it's police brutality, food desertification, whether it's women's rights and issues and children's issues. I mean, there's a mass incarceration, political prisoners. There's a whole panoply of issues that we deal with. And what we've been doing for the last 50 years since Malcolm left is we've been issue running. We run to issue to issue to issue, trying to resolve issues as opposed to concentrating energies to do the one thing that has to be done, and that's form nationhood in order to make all of those issues a part of a national agenda and a plan that we govern where we're exercising our rights for self-determination. And we can do this another 50 years going from issue to issue. It can be Black Lives Matter. It can be, we can have a lot of different movements and campaigns, but the real struggle is for self-determination. When you look at us from a collective perspective, but it's so easy to get galvanized by an issue here and an issue there and not look at the bigger picture in terms of what has to be done and even to solve those issues. You can't solve the reparations issue by not being organized properly because there's no one to pay it to, even if you were able to negotiate or whatever with the culprits in order to pay reparations. Even if they wanted to pay it, who would they pay it to? It's a collective remedy. It's not individual remedies. So you have to be organized in the correct collective form. I'll take a breath right here, pause, and I'll take some questions that might be more specific to what your interests are. I don't know how many people are on the call and what background they may have, and whether I'm preaching to the choir or whether I got people that are at this level where they're actually benefiting and learning something.
All right, well, everyone that's on now, Dr. Musa, is very, very interested in this process. Some of them have already been involved directly, particularly in the past couple of years. Of course, we met 5 years ago, and some are on to learn or to begin to learn. So we kind of have a multi-layered group at this point. But I'm going to open up the floor for everyone if you have a question or a comment, and then I'll interject mine. So I'm going to turn it back over to Brother Lumumba.
Yes, give thanks. Give thanks once again, Dr. Musa, for your presentation. At this junction, anyone have any questions or comments that anyone might have? If you would like to, use the button to raise your hand, or if you could do it in an orderly manner, you can unmute yourself and ask your question or comment. Introduce yourself first. All right, is there any questions or comments at this time?
Hi.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, go ahead. I
have a question. All right, my name is Dawn Walton. I'm from Philadelphia. I've worked with different community organizations, organized a lot of different movements, get out the vote, do community things, work for my community. But my question is there a central place where you could, like for Philadelphia, for instance, that we can, gather and put this in fruition? Ideas like get boots on the ground, get people organized. That's my.
Okay, well, I can answer that. That's what we've been doing for the past 5 years.
Okay.
Underground for doing the research, some of the other things, and we just initially last year, and again, we ran into the COVID situation, so a lot of things we could not do in our communities the way we projected, but now we have moved forward. So to answer your question, we've been to DC, New York, Newark, Baltimore, and a few other cities to begin.
Okay, I'm just listening. So I probably have to talk with you later, sis. And
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So to answer that, so there is a Philadelphia entity now, collective, that has been formed. We've been doing meetings almost every month, and actually this past year we've been doing like several Zoom that nationally people have been able to participate in. This weekend we were to launch our boots on the ground campaign to begin educating the masses about what we're talking about and begin to lay out some of the strategies to get the information in the communities. Because what we've learned, as Dr. Musa mentioned, it's important for us to make sure that the masses, we can intellectualize this all day and night, but if the masses don't know, then, our position is it creates a precarious situation. We don't want sheeple. We want our people to literally have some comprehension of what we're talking about. So we developed a strategy to at least make sure that they know some fundamentals, which I'll go into later. So to answer your question, yes, the Million Women March launched the We Charge Genocide 21 campaign in 2017. And that's when I met Dr. Musa. And thank you, Baba Bilal. He might be coming on shortly, Sunni Ali. He introduced us, and I went to Atlanta. So we were organized. We've been organizing for the past 5 years to get ready to do several things. One, starting on Monday, people will have available online to sign on to the letter of intent. The letter of intent is just a process and a formality to, again, help our people to get acclimated to what we're doing and how. The letter of intent is designed for 400 initial signers of groups, organizations, and so forth that says, we charge genocide. And this is a kind of formal introduction or announcement as such. So starting on Monday, anyone can support the letter of intent. It'll be online. So that way people will be able to start getting acclimated to what is genocide, what is human rights violations, or what is human rights period? What's the difference between human rights and civil rights? They'll begin to get that information. And there is a Philadelphia a chapter here called We Charge Genocide 21, the movement for Black justice and human rights.
Okay, because see, until I got with you for the Million Women March, I know anything. So you're right. Good marketing campaign and good campaign out there, because there's a lot of people that just don't know. So
Right. That's right. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, sister, for your question. Any more? Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry. Does someone else have a question or comment? Okay. Hey, brother, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. So was there any other questions or comments, family? Okay, well, let's go back to Dr. Musa. I have one quick one, and then we'll go back to Tim if he wants to share some other information. And it is, Dr. Musa, could you share with us, or would you please share with us, we say the word, okay, it's two words. One, we say the words self-determination. Could you give us more insight into that as it pertains to international law? In other words, it's not just some words. Could you kind of give us more insight into what that actually means and represent, and the power of that when you apply it in the international law context?
Okay, very good. Good question. The right to self-determination is firmly established in international law. The Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, one of the conventions that has been basically signed by most nations, all nations, basically, at this point in the juncture, even the United States. Yeah, I don't know if it's been ratified or whatever in all of those states, but the right to self-determination is firmly grounded in international law, which means that a people, a collective people, have the right to decide for themselves their political, economic, social, and cultural destiny. They should be able to name themselves and choose for themselves which direction that they want to go. With the African descendants in America, after emancipation, well, first let me back up a little. During the transatlantic slave trade, from a legal perspective and a practical perspective, the people that were taken out of the continent and transported to various places in the diaspora were turned and converted according to their legal systems in existence at the time from human beings into chattel. That was the first time in human history that slavery had taken on the form of chattel slavery. There had been slavery for thousands of years, but the types of slavery that was in Egypt and other places throughout Africa and Asia and Europe, it was not chattel slavery. Slaves had still human rights. They had the rights to have families. They were, they kept their family names and lineages, and they weren't stripped of their languages and religions. And, they had a lot of human rights that were still in place. But the transatlantic slave trade took on a whole different nature, where the people were converted into animals like horses and donkeys and pigs and camels. They were just stripped of all human rights, severed totally from their family relations and their birthrights. I say the word birthright, and most people in the diaspora have no real notion of birthright. I mean, it's just kind of like out of their vocabulary, out of their consciousness, because they've been so estranged from the concept of birthright. Because you don't have a birthright when you're chattel, right? Chairs and horses and donkeys and tables and equipment doesn't have birthright. They don't have birthrights. Only humans do. And when you're stripped of your humanity to that level, all of that is cut off. So part of the reparation process to rehabilitate and to restore and to get restitution, let alone the conversation about compensation, you have to first reacquire all of your human attributes. That's part and parcel of reparations. And a lot of that, no one else can do this for you. A lot of this has to be done for yourself. And I'm definitely not an advocate in waiting around for those who were the perpetrators of these gross human rights violations to pay or restore or pay reparations. It ain't gonna happen probably during my lifetime, and it may never happen. But I am a firm advocate that you don't need someone else to repair you or give you reparation. You can repair yourself, which is the best reparations. You got to restore yourself. You got to rehabilitate yourself. You have to compensate yourself. In terms, when I say compensation, I mean utilize your economic resources collectively to develop your own economic life and your own economic systems. And we are thoroughly capable of those things. As most of you all know, African descendants in America, just America, I ain't talking about the whole diaspora, but the close to 50 million African descendants in the United States territory earn more than 1.9 trillion, almost 2 trillion now, $2 trillion per year in terms of gross per capita income. And that's mainly from jobs. That's not even from businesses. That's basically from employment. And hell, all of us aren't even employed. Most of us ain't even employed. But that $2 trillion a year places us in the world about one of the ninth largest economies in the world. Sit on that for a minute. Ninth largest, that's larger than many places that you think are wealthy countries. That's larger than Saudi Arabia, Korea, Mexico. But we, in order to access that in any organized manner for economic development purposes, we need to be organized in the right structure so that we can organize our economics. And that's the main reason for organizing politically, is for economic development reasons. And that's always been the case. People come together because of the need for survival and economic development. That's why they organize politically. So you have to kind of take some of this stuff out of the clouds and out of academia and make it real basic and something that you can touch and feel and eat and utilize. And that's what you're really talking about when you say self-determination. You're talking about taking these concepts and making it real on a practical level, where you're naming yourself, you're reuniting with your own family, you're reuniting your family ties, you're recapturing your languages that you lost, your religion, you're going back to your religions, you're going back, you're doing all the things that were stripped from you as a human being in the process of making chattel slaves. So I hope that was kind of descriptive of what self-determination is. You know it when you see it, I put it like that. It's very easy to observe once you see it. People are deciding things for themselves. They're utilizing their own resources. They are organizing themselves politically in the form that they like to be in, and that's in accordance with their traditions and their culture. And now people utilize the word culture a lot because that seems to be a word that receives little objection when you organize yourselves around your culture. So even, and I got to say this, You see, when you're organizing yourselves as a nation, that does not, and that's going to be based on your ethnic and your cultural heritage. So that doesn't preclude you from any of your other citizenship rights. You're still a citizen of your city that you live in. You're a citizen of your state. You're a citizen of the county that you live in. You're a citizen of the national government that you might be affiliated with. However, you still have the right to organize as a nation based on your ethnic and cultural background. That's in addition to the other rights of citizenship you have. That's not excluding any of the other rights and things that you struggle for as a people for so many years. This is in addition to those statuses and those rights. But this is a collective status that you need in order to solve many of the issues that are special to your people, to your ethnic and cultural heritage. So this is the way to formalize and organize yourself in such a way to address the issues. You're not relying on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party to lay out a agenda that's going to address your needs, which never has been done. You're in a status of second-class Democrat, a second-class Republican. You're not really leading that political charge. And you can even elect a president that's from your ethnic group, but he doesn't have the power that's necessary to conduct affairs that's particular and special for your group. He's a president of all the people. And it just so happened that your issues are never placed in a priority position. So you have to take that into your own hands as a people and a group. And that's when you have self-determination, when you're ready to take the responsibility of planning for yourself and governing yourselves and developing and organizing your economics for your own benefit. I hope that answered the question.
Ashe, yes, absolutely. And just to give a sideboard to that, family, so one of the things that we'll be exemplifying to help folks to get more familiar and acclimated to these processes. So for next month, for the Million Woman March 25-year anniversary, literally, we will have some nanas and other folks who have a certain kind of capability to assist in name changing or name addition. That way we can begin to at least show the necessity, but also the capability for us to name ourselves. So starting next month, folks that are interested, we will be providing information about names, what the meanings of names are, where they come from. And then there'll literally be a few sessions where folks can, if they choose to, if they want to add on a name that they feel is an attribute to who they are or striving to be, they will have the capability to do that. This again is an action. It is to demonstrate and show we're serious about self-determination and, of course, moving forward in doing the things that represent that. So again, what Dr. Musa just indicated is that there are certain things that we can begin to do. Just as Brother Ken Bridges said, we have to deal with reparations for ourselves first, internal reparations. So these processes that we're introducing to the masses of our people now is some very key, but yet basic things: naming yourself, naming your children, et cetera, et cetera. So again, these are some of the things that you'll hear us talk more about. Lastly, we'll be talking more about developing societies. These are preludes to nation building, because again, we want people to see that we're not only capable, but that we're serious to establish our own societies first as we move forward to nation building. And we'll be giving you more information about some of those things in the next couple of weeks also. So, okay, let's open the floor back up. If there's any more questions or comments, please feel free to open your mic.
Okay, one thing I would like to add before we do anything else is one of the greatest things that you can do as an individual in the path toward restoring and repairing yourself is to take a DNA test. Take a DNA test because this is a scientific way to unite you with your people and your family. AfricanAncestry.com has the largest data bank for African descendants in the world. There's a lot of different companies out there, but none of them have a data bank that's the size of the one that's in AfricanAncestry.com. And that's important in terms of identifying it. Let me tell you what that does. First of all, in law, the strongest evidence that you can have in any court of law, in any forum, is DNA evidence. There is no evidence stronger than that. You can have 50 testimonies of people who can testify as to what they saw. It will all be trumped with DNA. If it doesn't, if it's not consistent with what the DNA evidence says, the DNA evidence wins. And that's in any court, okay? Now, knowing this, that's important information to know about yourself. You need to know your DNA. You need to know what's in your blood, what nobody can refute. It's in your blood. And you can learn your father's line, which is the Y chromosome for males, and the X chromosome, which males and females have, or females only have X chromosomes. You can have your matrilineal ancestry determined. That's your mother's 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 mother. So as you know, people have 4 grandparents, so it's really just testing your father's father's father and your mother's mother's mother for males. And with females, it's only testing really your mother's mother's mother, because females do not have Y chromosomes. But there are 4 grandparents. Every individual has 4 grandparents. You have your mother's side, your grandfather and your grandmother, on your father's side, your grandfather and your grandmother. But only 2 of those are really being tested. The father's mother's side and the mother's father's side is not really being tested. So they call that autosomal DNA. And those 2 people are basically, it's a generalized way to approach those 2 ancestors. And they can tell you what country and region they came from. That's how people come up with, I'm 75% African and 25% European and things like that, right? Because they're really weighing in on that autosomal DNA from those grandparents of the mother's father and the father's mother. But anyway, I don't want to go too far into that, but that's important. I think that's important information for all African descendants to know, because when they cut off your connection with your family and your people, that's major. Because at that point, that's how we really began to form our identity as an African diaspora, because of that act. But we need to restore that and restore ourselves to our families and to our tribes, to those nations, because without that, how do you access your birthright? You have a birthright on the continent of Africa, but how can you establish that? You got to have your DNA, because land and tribal land rights in Africa are accorded in the African system according to your tribal connections. Right. I don't know if this is too fast for you guys or not, okay? But I want to say that before we delve into some other areas, because those are things that need to be said and I don't hear nobody saying them. And these are just things that we have to know and have to begin to think about from a legal perspective. And I just want you to know that you got access and should, as a human being, you should be able to access your family tree. And that's important. Other people in the world have that. Other people in the world, I don't care where they come from in Europe or China or Asia or whatever, they know their family tree, even in Africa. Someone born on the continent can tell you and go all the way back, their ancestry 17, 20, 25, 30 generations back. As an African descendant, you can't do that. You're lucky if you can go back as far as your grandparents or your great-grandparents. You're lucky. But a human being needs to be able to go all the way back to his original folks. And you'll find out when you're able to do that, you'll really find out who you are. One of the identity questions that we have is, who are we? And it's hard to figure that out without information, the proper information. You're going on oral tradition oftentimes. And you know what someone was able to tell you, and which is strong and good, but that ain't the same as having scientific proof.
All right.
Yeah.
So
It looks like we have another question. But Baba Bilal Sunali has his hand up. Just want to acknowledge that.
Yes. Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Baba.
Glad this is happening. Well, I wanted to just go back to a point that that Musa was making about self-determination and how important it is. One of the reasons that this session is important, and the session that we're developing along these lines is important, is because people need to know point by point what when we say something, what we're talking about. There was a point in our history, not too far back, when we used the term separatists, and I believe Brother Robert Williams had come back. He had been in China, he had been in Cuba, and he had been in Africa. And when he came back to the United States, he told us that we should stop calling ourselves separatists, that we need to call ourselves self-determinationists, and say that our struggle is not for separation, but our struggle is for self-determination. And of course, there was a lot of arguments why people not understanding why he was saying that. People thinking that, well, he's diverting the struggles, he's making us lose focus. But what he was doing was focusing on what Dr. Musa said. Self-determination is recognized throughout the world. It's recognized, and by calling ourselves self-determinationists, we found that within, I can remember from 1972, 1973, when we began to use that term more, we developed more allies strategically here in the United States, amongst other nations here in the so-called United States, and definitely around the world, that people could identify with. People could identify with as a group when we said self-determination, that they wouldn't identify with when we just said when we said we were separatists. And so it was a learning point for all of us, and it was strategically a point of gaining strength and gaining allies in our struggle, because our struggle is for self-determination and not a struggle for people would not support a struggle for separation as we were defining it, as quickly as they will support tangibly a struggle for self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Baba. I just want to do a quick sidebar, if I may, on that issue again of self-determination. Because one of the things that we have taken on the responsibility of doing is providing information in regards to those who have come before us. We would be remiss if we did not provide that kind of information. And so we have some of the documents that Dr. Robert Brock filed, and some of his other work. We were blessed to get some of his copies of his actual documents. And for those that do not know, the committee that he formed to do some of the work that he did in the 1960s and 70s was called the Self-Determination Committee. And so joining us at an upcoming session will be the secretary of Dr. Robert Brock. She'll be joining us at another session, and she again provided us with some of his actual documents. And so that's why I wanted to point out that that term, that phrase, self-determination, is so important, so very important. And again, from all aspects that both Baba Balaus and Ali just mentioned, as well as Dr. Musa. So just a sidebar on that. You can Google Dr. Robert Brock Self-Determination Committee and see some of the work that they did during that era, during that time period. And again, these are some of the shoulders that we now stand on. This is some of the work that many have done. And again, going back to El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, you know, we've studied and are still studying him going to Africa, of course, in 1964, presenting to the African Union. And we'll be providing that speech in writing, or that presentation. We'll be making that available to folks. Because again, anything that we talk about, in many aspects, we're going to be able to show it to you, or help to provide that information for you, so that, you know, so that our people will be able to have more readily access to the things that we're talking about. Also, again, we found William Patterson, some of his papers. We now know where some of them are archived. And of course, it was with him and Paul Robeson that initiated the process in 1951. So just wanted to give you a little backdrop to what we're talking about and doing fundamentally as we move forward into the 21st century. Okay, back to Brother Lumumba.
All right. Give thanks. So I had, well, if there's any other questions or comments, I want to open the floor for that. With that being said, though, I had a question myself, perhaps not to be answered during this session, as we're getting close to closing, but something to be able to ponder on and analyze as far as possible solutions. So my question is, one, I have a question and a comment. Question is, one, what is a viable strategy in order to cut through some of the division and, you know, the tribalism that we get into as far as religiously in one aspect, but also now even as we identify as African people, African descended people, or not. So there's like the DOA. I can't even remember all of the acronyms that are thrown about now for lineage. So, you know, there's the descendants of slaves. There's another one. There's people who don't identify at all as African descendants. They're American. We're not from Africa, and this whole thing going on. So how do we cut through that and find a unifying thread, and be able to dismantle a lot of the division, you know, that has occurred within our community? So that's my question. My comment is when I thought about that unifying factor and the economical aspects of self-determination, I couldn't help but to think of the Day of Absence and Black Solidarity Day. And so within that, how can we be able to galvanize individuals to see the importance and, you know, just the gravity of that initiative, just for one day, that we cannot spend our dollars and just spend them collectively with ourselves in our own communities, in our own business, and not allow not a single cent to exit outside of our communities. Thank you.
I think I'll use that question to pivot into the area of economic development, trade, and investment. When you're talking about economic development, you have to first view yourself as a nation to know what people are you trying to develop and who. And this is a very practical question. People divide themselves up into many, many different categories naturally. And I am here to try to elevate and be consistent with what you learn from my brother Malcolm X. And that is, you're not in the position that you're in because of your religious orientation, your sexual orientation. You're not in your position because of that. You're in the position that we're in collectively, and what we share is the atrocities that were committed against our ancestors and our people, and we currently suffer today. So you organize politically based on that, and that's why nationhood is so important in order to achieve self-determination in an organized manner. We've been doing a pretty good job at it with what we got, with the knowledge base that we've been working in. But I want to strongly encourage everyone that's on this call to learn your human rights, to study human rights, to be an expert on human rights. Because without you knowing what you're entitled to, you can get so distracted into so many different other areas because there's so many problems. But if you don't keep your eye on the ball, you're just grinding with no end goal in mind. So it has to be you need a concrete objective. And nationhood is a concrete objective that organizes your economics and your social and your cultural aspects of the person. Especially us in the diaspora, and that's what we're in need of in order to advance further. If we don't do this, I can tell you now, 50 years from now, those of you all who are teenagers or in 20 years, in 50 years from now, you'll be 70 years old and they'll still be saying this, talk about all these different things that they want to address and want to deal with. It's very practical in our community, but you have to also, in addition to those things, organize yourself as a nation. That's very paramount in assisting yourself in achieving all of those things that you're looking for, because it's an organized manner of approaching it. You approach it the way modern people do in the 21st century. They organize into nations and they address those collective harms from an organized political perspective because they vote on it. They use democratic processes. And you have organized administration that's organizing the direction. Our people are lacking that. And we've developed a lot of other things. We got a lot of expertise, professions, and skills, and very unique areas. We have Black geniuses that's in every field that we are endeavored in. And how do you organize those Black geniuses? It's easy to do it as a nation. You, as a society or NGO, 501c3, all those things are short of nationhood. Okay, and I got to stress that. If nothing else, I want to stress that more than anything else. We have to, at this point in our history, we got to make that kind of step. There's no reason why Jamaica and Haiti, Barbados, and small groups of people that are less than, oftentimes they are less than 2 million people or 3 million people. They have nations. And we're too big, too strong, make too much money, and have too much of an economic force not to be organized like that. That changes the whole complexion of Africa and the world. For us to step up, I step our game up. That changes the table. That changes the balance of power, even when we come to the table. So you have to understand what's at stake here. And in terms of our economic development, one of the things that we suffer most in the West is that we're living in capitalistic societies without capital. We're operating capital systems without the necessary capital. And what is capital? Capital is not just cash, it's land, it's diamonds, it's gold, it's plutonium, it's titanium, it's cobalt, it's all of these precious minerals that God has already given our people. He's given us the richest real estate on the planet. We are not poor people. We are the richest people on the planet. But we have to view ourselves appropriately in order to access our own wealth, and don't have other folks outside of our family exploiting and becoming rich and wealthy nations based on our resources. We have to control our resources. That's part of self-determination. It's controlling your resources and directing it toward the better good of your people. So we have to understand that. And so talking about economic development, not only do we organize our resources because we make contributions based on our wages and our jobs and all of those things, and that's primarily what we have in the Western Hemisphere, wages. But we need to organize businesses. We need to trade with one another. We need to, when I say one another, I'm speaking of our brothers on the continent, as well as brothers here in the States and locally. We can always operate locally and internationally. We're not confined to just operating locally. And so we have to broaden our perspectives because it can make your task easier locally if you are connected internationally. That's what the Chinese do. That's what the Jews do. That's what the Europeans do, and all of the other Asians. They use their homeland, or if they're in the diaspora, they use their connection with their native homelands in order to develop themselves economically. And being from a homeland that's the richest real estate on the planet, we cannot eliminate that as a capital source. You know, if you need capital, you have to develop your capital. Real estate has always been capital. The African continent is a very large continent of real estate. All of that is our capital. All of the things that's in the ground is our capital. All the human resources are our capital. All of those are capital sources. So we have to broaden our minds to encompass this when we're making plans and strategies. And we sometimes thinking small comes to harm you because you miss out on the bigger opportunities that you have to reach the goals that you're seeking to reach. So that's a bit that I want to throw out there, just so that we can make sure our actions and our energies are spent in areas that's going to bring us large returns. And that's it.
Okay, yes, sir. I just wanted to clarify really quickly, because part of my question was, how can we assert ourselves as a nation when we can't even decide that we belong to that nation? So the example I was given is like the ADOS versus the FBA. So these are factions of Blacks in the United States who somehow have developed themselves as opponents and oppositions. And one claims, we're the descendants of slaves, African descendant slaves. And then the other is saying, no, we have this other origin. So, and then we have the faction of people who identify as Native and Native American, and they don't identify at all with being African. So how do we pull people in these different factions into one form of nationhood when they don't even believe that they belong together in the first place?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a stab at that real quickly.
Yeah.
Is that what we have found successful? And before COVID, we were planning a series of conferences where we educate and we organize at those conferences. We spend what's successful for us, we spend 3 days at a conference. The first 2, we're educating and getting feedback, first 2 days. But the third day, we spend on organizing. In other words, organizing whatever we've concluded, the conclusions that we've reached, and the decisions that have been made, and how to implement, and a strategy and plans on implementation. And that has been an effective method of moving forward. Now, a series of those can be conducted and educate a group of people, especially the ones who are going to be the disseminators of information. They have to be organized and given that kind of information. So conferences has been the way. Now, the Center for Civil and Human Rights here in Atlanta, Georgia, has been a venue that we have worked out relationships with to put on events that's in line with what we're talking about, because this is the place, I guess the sister asked earlier, where's a place? I'm saying we can create that space as the place that we channel activities for organization, as well as distribution of information. And it's a museum, it's an educational institution that's designed to educate and to further the movement of civil and human rights. So we want to utilize that as a resource. So that is a technique that you can use to solve those issues in terms of people having different opinions and different perspectives. We want to educate one another, because what I found is that everybody brings a portion of the truth with them. And sometimes we got to bring and combine that truth and reach conclusions where we can move forward. Even if your proposition or the faction that you have is not the majority. The majority thinks some other way. That's okay. But if you go through a democratic process of conflict resolution or resolving disputes, I think we're much more likely into coming to a satisfactory conclusion and have some unity in terms of our thinking. Oftentimes, the reason why people have different divergent opinions is because they have different information. Somebody want to turn down their mute their microphone. Yeah, okay. And one of the reasons why we have divergent positions is that we're not sharing the same information. And once we have similar and same information, oftentimes we'll come to the same conclusion. It's just that we have to have a forum to share that information. In terms of, and you have to do study on our background. That's why it's so important. The genetics is so important, because you can show who you are based on your blood. It's in your blood. And where you come from, and all those questions can be answered with DNA with certainty, So, of course, we're a composite of African descent. Everyone came from Africa ultimately, but more recently, we have migrated out of the continent, and we met with other African descendants that were already here on the continent and in the Western Hemisphere, because there have been waves of migrations out of Africa. And so they're both correct, but they're correct and they need to share the information so they can have a better picture of the whole puzzle. Is that we are a combination of indigenous people and people brought to Africa now, because we've mixed several generations here in the territory. So we mixed with Europeans, we're mixed with native African people that were here in the Americas long before Columbus. And we are definitely mixed with people that migrated through the transatlantic slave trade. So all of those things are true. So we are not necessarily opposed to one another. It's just that we are just sharing different aspects of the same picture.
Yes, give thanks, give thanks.
Yeah.
And Baba Bilal, I believe you had a comment for that.
Yeah, it's right along with what Moose was saying. I was an attendant of that conference that he's speaking of in Jackson, Mississippi, at Tougaloo College, where we came together just on that basis. I mean, and there were different groups that call themselves nations and who constitute nations, and we began to recognize that so when we say we are a nation in a nation, we're not just saying that that Black people are a nation within corporate America or the United States of America, but we are a nation. You can be like, for instance, there were people who were like, there were various Moorish nations and various Moorish groups historically. So when people say Moors, you're not just talking about one group of people. And so and amongst the Mende people, you had different groups. And I know myself, I'm I can trace on my father's side, on my father's mother's side, that my family is Garifuna, and we're from the Mali Empire. We're from the Mali Empire centuries ago. But being here, you know, it is, so I can't say that we are all from the Mali Empire. I know that that's a part of my family, and that other people have different ethnic things that they can refer to, that and we have developed structurally different aspects of nationhood. Now, that conference was called the First Conference on Confederation, for us to consider us becoming one nation and not dissolving the nations that we are, but becoming one nation under a form of nationhood called confederation. And in that way, we could be one nation. We could be one nation that's accepted by the African Union and by the Organization of American States. We just need to, more people need to study who they are, and we need to not get confused with saying that because I know who I am, I'm going to say that that's all of us 50 million African descendants here is the same thing. No, we're, like Musa was saying, we're all different, and we all different, but we all face the same oppression. Like one brother said, we may have come over here on different ships, but we all in the same boat now. And if we all in the same boat now, facing under the same form of colonialism, and we need to work our way out of this colonialism and still belong to the nations we belong to, but form a nation that all of us belong to. And that's one way we can get out. I know I've been devoted myself to continue to tell people about this conference on confederation and explain to people how we have to come back to this, and how we have to come back to not being warring nations. It was at that conference, it was the Nation of Islam, there was the Washita, there was the Yamasee, there was the Chickasaw, and there was the Moorish, there was the Moorish Empire, the Moorish Science Temple of America. There was so many groups, but what we all had to realize, and there was those people who were part of the United Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League, as well as the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa. We all were all in that conference, all in that conference in 2017. Of course, COVID did a lot to disrupt us, but we have so as we move forward, we just need to remind ourselves of what we've been through, and bring up to people what we've already accomplished in unity, so that we don't fall backwards as we don't fall backwards as we define ourselves.
In 4 different seasons.
Yeah, I rest.
That was I love the way my brother Bilal just articulated the concept. And we are, I mean, just like we are many families, we are many tribes, we have a lot of different backgrounds and orientations, how we view ourselves, but we can still organize as a nation of the diaspora, with all of those groups as a part of it. You don't have to give up anything. If you Gullah Geechee, you still Gullah Geechee. But you can be a Gullah Geechee and a member of the African Diaspora Nation. You're not giving up anything. You're not giving up your city, your citizenship to your America. Your government checks don't stop. Your Social Security checks don't stop. You're a member of your state. Whatever benefits you get from your state, you're a citizen. We fought hard for those memberships. A member of your county and your city. All of those are different levels of citizenship. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we are a diaspora and a part and have a common legacy as a result of that. And we can organize on that basis into nationhood.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Much appreciated. Thank you, Dr. Musa. Thank you, Baba Bilal. And just one final question, or just to reiterate my my question on Black Solidarity Day, the day of absence. Would that be looked at as a viable, or one of the possible viable initiations in order to push us forward in the realm of self-determination and economical development? And how can we get people to get on board with this concept, from the 70s? It's surprising that currently today, a lot more people don't even know about, this day, on this celebration. And, I've put it out over the past couple of years and have gotten little feedback from it as far as people wanting to participate and organize around this concept. How can we get people, more engaged and just a better understanding of the gravity that actually would hold?
Well, again, my answer is organizing conferences. That's an organizing technique. All of this are organizing techniques that are used to galvanize a people around a shared vision. Conferences. So your Solidarity Day is a good concept. Organize accordingly, but use that for not only education purposes, because education is one of the most revolutionary acts you can do to properly educate your people. And to organize in those sessions where we're educating ourselves and we're learning one another, we're building solidarity, and we organize out of those conferences. That is a very effective technique that I've seen work. And that has gotten us off to a good start. But we're still growing, we're still growing, but I think we're going to get there. In terms of the economic development piece, I do want to announce that in December, there's a delegation of African diaspora business people and investors who are going to Africa, Sierra Leone and Senegal, to do some cultural and historic visitations, of course, but to also organize in business organizations, whether it's partnerships, corporations, trusts, whatever form of business organization, with our brothers and our family on the continent, so that you can access your birthright. get your DNA, because that's going to give you tests. That's going to give you specific areas and land masses where your birthright lies. You have access to citizenship, diplomatic relations, diplomatic offices. All of these things are available to us as tools to organize ourselves. And so this is coming up in December. Let's see, the website you can go to is called, I'd have to look through my phone to get you the actual website where you can go. But that can be done. That's happening in December. So delegates, so we're still organizing economically as we organize politically. We're developing banks. We're developing, I got a list of about 20 different projects that you can access to connect with economically with your brothers in Africa. We have funding and capital available in these areas. And so we are eliminating all of the previous barriers. We're learning how to monetize our resources so that we have capital available to advance building factories and manufacturing plants and refineries of our minerals, so that we're not selling raw materials anymore. We're selling finished products. You can't get a cell phone if you don't use the materials out of Africa. We need to be selling end products, not the raw resources. So we have to develop that sector of economic organizations in the form of manufacturing plants and so forth, warehouses and doing construction projects, major construction projects here on the in the diaspora as well as on the continent. And we're hoping to provide those opportunities for people to get together so we can form those business organizations to move forward. We're no longer looking at ourselves just as mom and pop operations. We're taking those mom and pop operations and making them multinational organizations where they're in various countries, not just here, in your local neighborhood, which builds up our local communities because we got new resources and new opportunities for our kids, got new careers for our kids who are studying and working in many major corporations and have access to a plethora of work experiences. But we have to leverage those and help build our whole people from a Pan-Africanist perspective. So all of those are good ideas. All of these things are things that have worked for us. We just got to continue it and expand it to its logical conclusion. And many of our problems will be solved. We can solve our own problems. We don't have to get a nickel of the reparations that's owed to us. And we can repair ourselves because we have the resources to work with.
Ashe.
Okay,
Right.
quick sidebar, if I may, for those who are not familiar with Black Solidarity Day and MWM and the Charge Genocide 21 Collective is really pushing it this year as we have for the past couple of years. But the history of Black Solidarity Day started I believe in 1968, initially kicked off in New York. And the concept was, and this is why we're going to use this as a model today, because people already did it and they showed that it could work. But the concept was for one day, not to spend any money with anyone else, just for one day. Because our position is that we can't do that for one day, then how are we going to do these other things? So we're helping our people to get, again, acclimated to a mindset. And so this year, it's November the 7th. Historically, 50-something years ago when it was started by a brother in New York, the idea was to do it the day before the election day. The primary election is the first Tuesday in November. And so Black Solidarity Day was implemented on the day before, that Monday. And the concept was to spend no money, and it was to show the power of the Black dollar. And so this year we're organizing nationwide. And when we kicked off MWM-25, one of those projects is to help people to know more about Black Solidarity Day, the history, the impact that it had. Because during that 60s era, people literally all over the country was observing Black Solidarity Day in the context of the Day of Abstinence. And that meant don't spend any money with anyone other than, well, they weren't spending it at all. Ours is now only spend it with Black folks. And so we're going to be getting a listing of Black businesses in various cities who are more inclined to work in the community, because we don't just want to promote Black business. That's not it. That's not for us. We want to promote Black businesses that are trying to do something in the community for this particular project. Okay. So again, the concept will be that folks will have a listing of the Black businesses in their area that are in support of groups, organizations that are striving for self-determination. And those are the businesses that we will support on Black Solidarity Day. So just a sidebar. Again, if you want more information, you can email us at nationalmwm@aol.com. We'll be forming committees for next month, starting next month as a part of our MWM-25.
All right. Give thanks. Okay, with that being said, I want to open up the floor one more time for any final questions or comments before we get ready to close this program out. So again, open the floor up again. You can open your mic up or raise your hand, and do we acknowledge any questions or comments?
Real briefly, I love the concept of the Black Solidarity Day and the buying Black. In fact, there's a business now called We Buy Black, and they're doing extremely well. And that concept needs to be expanded. I like spending money for one day. That's good, but we have to have a plan where the next step is we spend money with only our people for a week. And then we want to spend money with our people for only a month. We want to progressively get better and better, bigger and bigger, and encompass larger and larger segments of our people. And let them know from the beginning, yeah, we're spending one day now that we're spending money with only our Black people, but our plan is next year we do it for 1 week, or next month we're going to do it for 1 week. In 3 months we're going to do it, for a month, okay? But we can structure a platform where this is progressively spreading, and the concept is progressively spreading. So yeah, I love those concepts, and all of these that I've heard are very good ideas, and ideas that have to be built on. Let's just put our heads together and do it strategically, and make sure that we are constantly moving forward. We're spreading and expanding.
Ashe.
Give thanks. All right, if there's no final questions or comments, if we can get any closing remarks from Baba Bilal. Yes, Baba Bilal.
Yeah, just quickly, just want to say it's good to see everybody. It's good to see everybody on and listening and studying and learning. And that's what we need. We need to understand that this is a process. This is a process, and we need to never. We need to look back, but we don't need to step back. We need to just look back and see what was done, but keep moving forward.
Yes, sir. Much appreciated. Give thanks. All right, family. So with that being said, I want to give a final word. Sister Empress, Dr. Empress.
Yay, bo.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, and this is one of many sessions that we'll be doing. Information wise, we want to make sure again that we start helping our folks to get acclimated to some of the language, some of the concepts that we've been talking about. But also want to remind everyone that this is a process, as Baba Bilal just said. So, you know, for those who are looking for quick solutions and all of that, it's not that like we're going to drag anything, because we're definitely not going to do that, but certainly it is a process. I want to thank, of course, Dr. Musa Dan Fodio for joining us. I look so forward to working with him and others in the future as we build this coalition. Baba Bilal has been extremely instrumental in helping us to grow and develop. You know, and that's what it's about. It's about growing and develop. And we're very thankful for those who've come before us that are still with us to help guide us through some of these processes. We're certainly ready and more than willing to do so. This weekend, we say we Charge Genocide 21. We took this weekend because people are observing Labor Day weekend. And our position is there can be no more discussion, observance, celebration, or what have you, unless there's some discussion and moving forward with recognizing the enslaved labor, free labor, the horrendous labor, etc., of our people. We can no longer look at Labor Day or Labor Day weekend in the same context after this weekend, meaning, again, the labor of our people that built this country primarily can no longer be dismissed, can no longer be discarded in any kind of manner, and there must be reparatory justice in the context of reparations and all remedies that are relevant to that. And so again, for those who are interested in becoming really actively involved as an activist, an advocate, a paralegal, or you even want to journey into the field of law, we are preparing to establish some form of institution or center that will be able to provide those kinds of things. Lastly, in the next month or so, we will have a YouTube channel ready that will provide human rights information 101 and other kinds of things relevant to the We Charge Genocide 21 project and other things that Dr. Musa mentioned, as well as Baba Bilal with the Black Belt Coalition. We are collectively doing some things in a way that represents the diversity, and I mean that only in the context of there's different approaches. That's all. We got the same agenda or the same bottom line, but just some different approaches. And we will be supporting one another in those various applications. But it is certainly taking us forward, I think, in a very, very not only expeditious manner, but in a very holistic and progressive manner. So again, we thank everyone. For those that are interested, you can email us at nationalmwm@aol.com. We have other sessions coming up for the next couple of days. On Monday, again, you'll be able to download the letter of intent as well as sign on. Again, the focus is to get 400 plus signatures from different, the executive portions of different groups, organizations, etc., to sign on to the letter of intent, just as an indication and a form of education for our people to see, here's the processes that we're putting in place. We want the world to see that we are both organized and capable to do the work that our ancestors have laid out for us to do. So again, you can reach us at nationalmwm@aol.com or nbhrproject@gmail.com. You can also go to www.wechargegenocide21.com. That will be updated in the next couple of days as well. And if you'd like to make a donation, which we certainly appreciate because we are definitely self-determined oriented, you can do so by using Cash App for $HOT1111. Again, $HOT1111, or PayPal us at National Black Human Rights Project, and that's at nbhrproject@gmail.com. I thank everyone again. Brother Lumumba, you can take us out.
Wait, before you do, I do want to share the website that I mentioned for those
Yes, I was just going to say that too. If you have any website, any information so folks can reach you, social media or any other regards, please, get that information out.
Okay. Yeah, please write this down for those who are interested in economic development and this trade conference and mission that takes place in December of this year. It is called the African Diaspora Connect.com. African Diaspora Connect.com. Or connection, I'm sorry. African Diaspora Connection.com. African Diaspora Connection.com.
All right. Give thanks. I'm putting that in the chat as well, so hopefully that comes through. Okay, so folks can copy and paste that into their search engines. All right, and Baba Bilal, if you have anything coming up you want to share, any information, any contact information, folks get in contact with you, you can please do so as well.
Yeah, I just want to share one website, which is www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org. www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org. That will take you to a plethora of action items that we are involved in, and one of them is the forward motion of this, which is through the Black Belt Coalition on Human Rights, and there's several others. But if you go to that website, you'll see how to connect. You'll see based on what it is you want to do, how to connect with people who are doing just that.
Okay,
Thank
let me make sure.
Let me correct myself. I was right at first. It's African Diaspora Connect.com, not connection. African Diaspora Connect.com.
Okay, so I attempted to put that in the search engine. Okay, I'm trying to put the second one there, African Diaspora.
But Lumumba, Imam is with an I, not an E.
I'm correcting it now.
Okay, thank you, much appreciated. I'm trying to do this all in real time, so give thanks. Okay, so I'm just going to
also, if I may remind everyone to tune in to New Day, Resurrection, and Liberation. I'll put that in the chat in a minute as well, tomorrow night. And as Baba Bilal mentioned, we'll be having further discussion on, with the We Charge Genocide 21, the connection to human rights violations as it pertains to COINTELPRO, political prisoners, the 13th Amendment, juvenile injustice, and the prison industrialized complex. So those are some of the topics for tomorrow as it pertains to our 21 areas. And again, we're looking at labor as being one of the primary, and of course, COINTELPRO, since we just come out of Black August.
All right. Yes, indeed. All right, it's an excellent session for tonight. Give thanks once again. Thank you to listening audience, for our presenters, for the hosts. Thank you for your time, energy, effort, determination, dedication, and discipline. Much appreciated. Salutes to those who have put in this work and who still carry on that work as today, and passing on the mantle for those that are coming in line to follow up. With that being said, I want to thank everyone again. I want to say strategize, organize, mobilize, unify or die, freedom or death. All right. And with that being said, I'm going to close this session out. Peace and love, family.
Peace and love.